Good day and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today is February 28th, 2022. We are continuing our coverage of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. And we have a lot to cover today, and we'll just jump right in it. So first and foremost, I want to talk about the propagandizing of the war. And this is very, very important to talk about and discuss, as some things we are hearing are simply not, in fact, occurring on the ground. And one key point that I wanted to talk about was the alleged massacre that took place on Snake Island off the coast of the Ukraine in the Black Sea. And allegedly, as most of you have witnessed some of the videos, that the Ukrainian soldiers, their final words were something of the effect of fuck you to the Russian military prior to being exterminated on the island. Now we know for a fact that that did not happen. Those soldiers were in fact taken prisoner by the Russian forces and have been well treated, and there's video evidence of that. Another issue is there wasn't 13 of them. There was actually reportedly 80 of these soldiers on that island. So just under a company strength element was assigned to that island in the Black Sea. So again, very, very important to take with a grain of salt some of the things that you're hearing about in the mainstream media, and obviously some of the propaganda coming from the Ukrainian government and from the Russian government as well. You have to find that happy medium, well, not happy medium, but a medium in between of what is allegedly occurring and what is actually occurring. So I hope that makes sense. Additionally, I was watching another mainstream media outlet, and they had an American general on there, a general in the he was U.S. Army or Air Force, not certain of which, but he believed that the Russians should have taken Kiev in one day, and he actually quoted that the Russians should have taken Kiev in one day. And if you go back to my videos, I have referenced General Milley in claiming that the Russians would take Kiev in 72 hours, and I don't understand where they're getting this information and why they're messaging this information when it's simply not true. Here we are, well over 72 hours since the start of the conflict, and Kiev has not fallen. And again, the whole concept that Kiev could be taken in one day is simply ridiculous. I mean, again, from a military perspective, it is a very, very difficult military target to take. Again, it's a city of 3 million people, with multiple combat brigades that are defending the city, to include now a very large civil populace, which is being armed. In the early stages of the conflict, they were handing out AK-47s and Dragunovs and other weapons very liberally, and up to 18 to 25,000 assault rifles were handed out to the populace. So again, very, very difficult nut to crack in terms of the Russians. And you can see exactly kind of what the Russian war goal is right now, is to envelop and seal off Kiev, and that's what they're trying to do right now. I think it would be very, very difficult, and again, it would not be a very wise decision to attempt to storm Kiev. I do believe in the early stages, the first 2 days of the conflict, indeed, we did see multiple Russian airborne operations that were very, very aggressive, and unfortunately for the Russians, were failures. We saw a airborne operation or an air assault operation to the northeast of the northwest of Kiev in this area near Hostomel. And then we observed another airborne operation to the southwest of Kiev as well. And I believe that was a very, very audacious operation to attempt to decapitate, seal off the city, and move in quickly in hopes that initial resistance would not be that great. And again, there was a miscalculation there, and obviously the resistance was very, very intense. And those missions, those operations by the Russian VDV Spetsnaz were repelled. And now they're having to take a step back and go to Op Plan 2, which will be the sealing off of Kiev and besieging it, and then moving in smaller infantry units later as they start to wear down the Ukrainian military units in the city. But this is a very good right now depiction of Russian movements around the city. We know there was a tank brigade, a Ukrainian tank brigade, stationed just outside of Chernihiv, and this unit has been providing exceptional resistance against the Russian military in conjunction with territorial defense brigades and Ukrainian special operation units assisting this tank brigade in attempting to repel the Russian advance. But we do know that the Russians are striking military warehouses, command and control, supply nodes, and eventually this tank brigade is going to both run out of fuel and it's going to run out of ammunition at a certain point. And we see here to the east of Kiev, the Russians are indeed encircling the city, both of Chernihiv, and putting themselves in a position to attempt to seal off Kiev. Furthermore, we've had reports over the last 24 hours of a very long column of Russian motorized and mechanized formations of several hundred vehicles extending for several miles just to the north of Kiev and moving south. So again, the whole premise that the Russians may be losing this fight, as have been quoted by various news sources and some of these talking head generals that have proven themselves to not have judged the course of this conflict in a very reasonable manner. And again, go back, I'm again not trying to toot my horn, please understand that, but go back to some of my previous videos, and I declared that the Russians would not seize Kiev in 76 hours, as General Milley had claimed, and then some of these whacknut generals claiming that the Russians should have seized Kiev in one day is just simply way out there in left field. And I quite frankly, again, I don't know why they're saying that sort of thing on air, other than just to facilitate further propagandizing of the war that the Russians are being defeated, because the Russians are not being defeated. They have suffered setbacks. They have suffered casualties. Are they running into more resistance than anticipated? I would say no. I would say that they're running into the top tier level of resistance that was anticipated. And again, while unfortunate for the Russians, they were aware that they could run into this kind of resistance, and indeed they are. In other areas of the conflict, we continue to see the Russians attempt to engage and operate near Harkov. We understand within the last several hours that there was a Russian grad strike very close to the center of Harkov. We did see the prior day a Russian light infantry unit or various Russian light infantry, possibly Spetsnaz reconnaissance troops, attempt to enter the city. And what they're doing, they're probing. They're trying to find out what are the weak points within the Ukrainian positions near Harkov. They're attempting to identify targets for both the Russian Air Force and obviously Russian artillery brigades and artillery assets that can be brought to bear instead of moving mechanized forces into the city, which would be very, very problematic given the amounts of anti-tank guided weapon systems that the Ukrainians possess. So again, it's a matter of sealing off and then bringing in the Russian heavy artillery, which they're very proficient at using, and using drones to go over targets over Harkov, and then call in these artillery strikes to reduce the Ukrainian military. Now, at the same time, please understand the Ukrainian military is performing very, very well given the circumstance. Now, they are being supported by a heavy, heavy dose of Western intelligence, where they're getting real-time information on the movement of Russian forces within the confines of this conflict. So that is having a major, major challenge right now for the Russian military in terms of this this intel information that is coming in from the West being delivered to the Ukrainians, where they can then maneuver their forces to position themselves and stop some of the Russian advances. And furthermore, we understand that some of this real-time intelligence is giving actual targeting information to Ukrainian artillery batteries to then target Russian artillery assets and Russian convoys that are further behind the main front lines at this point. So again, that is one of the reasons why the Russians have upped their nuclear posture. The Russians are not happy over what they perceive as this Western intervention in this conflict. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as soon as I finish just kind of looking at the overall battle map as what we're seeing as of today. Further to the east, we're seeing the separatists, with the support of Russian assets, make limited drives. Again, these areas to the east facing the Russian separatists, they have really, meaning the Ukrainians, have prepared the battlefield for some time now. And these are fortified positions that are facing the separatists and the Russians along the Luhansk and Donetsk routes of advance for the Russian and separatist forces. So again, not a lot of headway being made by the separatist or the Russian forces in this area, again, because they've kind of prepared for operations in this area. The most successful operations are happening out of Crimea. So a very large chunk of territory has been taken by the Russians. The Russians have moved fairly rapidly, again, and this is some distance that the Russians have moved. So again, the whole concept that they're being defeated again is really kind of ridiculous. Yes, they are taking casualties. There are setbacks. It's war, and it's going to happen. But to say that they're being defeated is kind of ridiculous. So they've moved to the northeast, seizing control of Berdyansk, and they're looking right now to eventually hope to encircle Mariupol and completely seal Mariupol off before possibly reducing it and possibly moving in additional forces to take Mariupol. I think they will seize Mariupol off. They will move National Guard assets around the city. But again, the storming of Mariupol, I would say, is highly doubtful. At this point, they would look to make Mariupol capitulate. They will probably start bringing incremental pressure on Mariupol with the Grad and other artillery assets to cause stress on the city as the Russians continue to advance and look to encircle and seal Mariupol off. So again, these mechanized formations, these maneuver formations, are going to seal Mariupol off, and then Russian National Guard elements will come in and then take those positions, and for the Russians, hopefully hold those positions as some of these mechanized formations continue their operations in other parts of the country. But right now, and then back over here to Kherson, we did see the Russians crossed the Dnieper River and initially moved into Kherson, but then again there was a counterattack, and the Russians were driven out. And you can see here where they still hold an area to the west of the Dnieper River and continue to look to drive further north, west, and east. But again, any hope of progressing towards Odessa, there are multiple river terrain features and lakes and again rivers in their way that is going to prevent a rapid and successful move to Odessa over land. And I know that they have conducted some amphibious reconnaissance operations near Odessa, and again, Odessa is very, very well fortified and strengthened, as well as Mariupol. So again, the whole concept that the Russians would storm these cities, I do not believe is going to happen. They're going to seal them off and then try to get them to capitulate at a later date. And again, the size of these cities, as I talked about, weeks before the conflict started, was going to be a big issue for the Russians. And again, the most prudent method for a successful Russian operation, again, is going to be seal these cities off. But at the same time, if you listen to the mainstream media, they declare that no major area of no major city has been taken by the Russians yet. But that's on purpose. The Russians are not trying to enter these cities in force, because again, the Ukrainians are attempting to hold those cities with significant force constructs, and they have lots of anti-tank weapons, and it just would not be prudent for the Russians to move into these cities. So they're not. It's not that they don't want to take the cities, but they're not trying to take the cities at this point. And again, they're for the most part trying to seal them off and utilize light infantry to launch probing operations and reconnaissance operations in force into a lot of these large built-up urban areas. Now, the biggest concern right now for the world is the continued prospect that the West is going to continue arming Ukraine. And within the last several hours now, we're starting to hear that several European countries may start providing actual fixed-wing, multi-role fighter aircraft to the Ukrainians. And that's obviously going to be a big concern for the Russians. The Russians have degraded some of the Ukrainian air defense network, but especially in the West, the Ukrainians are still operate a very robust air defense network. It's been more degraded in the east of the country, but in the west of the country, they still operate, again, a very sizable air defense network, which is also allowing the Ukrainians to operate fixed-wing aircraft and continue air-to-ground operations against the Russians. And I don't think that was completely anticipated. And in all likelihood, the Ukrainians are using highways to take off from, much like Taiwan has a plan for against the Chinese. So as Russia launches cruise missiles against some of these air bases and airfields, and they crater the runways, the Ukrainians in all probability are moving some of their fixed-wing assets to other areas, and they're probably in all likelihood using highways and roads to take off from. And we know they're doing that with their drones, especially the TB2 drones from Turkey. They are still in operation. And in all probability, they are launching them from roads and highways and have moved away from some of the major air bases that were reduced with Russian cruise missiles and ballistic missiles as well. But the big issue is right now for the Russians is just how much the West is willing to provide assets and weapons to the Ukraine. And that could be an issue, which, again, that's why we're seeing the Russians up their nuclear posture. And we're seeing the Belarusians, in fact, quite possibly getting ready to declare open hostilities against Ukraine. And the concept behind that could be to eventually to come down and cut off these border areas, or make an attempt to at some point, to limit the movement of supplies by the West, especially in some of these weapon systems that are moving across the border. If the Russians want to be successful, they're going to have to, at some point, seal that border off and limit the weapon systems that are coming into the country. And quite frankly, right now, the Russians really don't have any choice in terms of continuing to prosecute the conflict. If they stop prosecuting the conflict right now, what they're looking at is their worst case scenario, where the Ukraine may not necessarily join the West, but they would be a very, very armed society very quickly that could come back to haunt the Russians at some point. So I don't really think it is in the Russians' best interest to stop fighting, and they really have no choice at this point but to continue with their operational plan and look to finally at some point defeat Ukraine and make the Ukraine capitulate. But again, that is the headlines for today. We will obviously have more content very, very soon. Hope everybody has a great day.